call for inside of yourself is the opportunity we're all present with. That we do this as a Christ action, and that is a consciousness of anointed of God. However it's referred to, is that authority of God that comes into our midst, comes into the flesh. It's not about religious training. It's not about do we know per se the scripture. It's much more about are we willing to be attuned to our true nature. So this is what we do foremost in the movement of spiritual inner awareness. We come into the consciousness we call the soul. And that is what we also refer to as the individual part of God in its freedom. As we make our way around our life, encountering, discovering, having our adventures. I'm sure if any one of us took stock right now, we'd find we've been having adventures. We've been having challenges, that there are situations in our life that we don't understand, that we often want to control. So that's probably one of those temptations right now, especially with Mom, that she would love to control, but in a way, that's not what's working right now. What's working is to trust that God is in control, that is how this creation has been created all along. God has had the control that comes forward as how things work. That's very practical. Just have your experience and pay attention to what happens in your experience, how it flows for you, how you experience it inside. And as we discover that we have joy, we have peace, we have understanding, and most of all, that we have loving for ourselves, and that's very important. It's the first move, that God is love, and all who dwell in love dwell in God, and God in Him. Maybe you recognize that as something from 1 John in the scripture. Sometimes people want to know if MSIA is Christian. It's certainly of the Christ. And whether that then becomes, well, do you believe in every single thing that's written in the Bible? How would we possibly do that? And so some people call upon us to do that, but how many of you could recite the Bible if you had to? So if you don't know fully what's in there, how would you know how to follow it and bring your life so it adheres to what that word is? So what we follow is a living scripture, and that also is inside. So we don't have to go anywhere other than be aware, be conscious inside of what's true for you. And that is our great opportunity, is to be awake in that truth. We give thanks that we have called ourselves forward here tonight as a gathering of those who love God. I claim that for you, even if you are not so sure that you would claim that for yourself. I'll claim it for you. And that when we really behold the love of God, it ushers forth without any kind of limitation. It's called unconditional love. We can't control it. We can't stop it. It just is. Beirish Beishan. So that was a little short seminar, maybe about this big. Sometimes that's how it works. Well, I wrote some notes. I don't often do this in preparation, but I was sitting back there earlier, and just some information started coming out that I decided I would write down. And so here goes. I'm going to read back some of it, at least for you. One of the things you're going to hear, and so you're hearing it again now for those who've been around for a while, is you're not given anything you cannot handle. Now, hopefully that's good news. And what that means is that we have the consciousness within us to deal with every event and every circumstance, every outcome, everything that goes our way, everything that doesn't go our way. We have a consciousness inside us that knows how to handle that. So if we're not having that experience, move. So we are a movement. We are the movement of spiritual inner awareness. And that gives a hint that we need to move, we need to keep going. So regardless of what's taking place, if you don't find your peace, if you don't find your joy, you don't find what's true for you, or whatever you're looking for, keep going. Have patience, have a willingness to hang in there. What I have next here is life as a roller coaster. The next word is tornado. Anybody been on a roller coaster before? And maybe, if nothing else, something like a roller coaster in the way your life has gone up, down, around, maybe faster than you liked. Well, for those of us who've been on a roller coaster, you know the first part where it starts kind of cranking and you're going up. That part's easy. You ever notice that part? It's easy. It's when what goes up must come down that it becomes something we don't necessarily experience in a way that we like or that we consider we can handle. So that's often the place where people are screaming or trying to in some way stop the roller coaster so they can get off. But that's usually not a very good idea why it's going down at a very high rate of speed. So it's better to stay in. Anybody here one of those people that when you're on a roller coaster you go like this? Okay, we have a few. And what would that mean? It's like, I embrace the speed. I embrace the thrill. I embrace that part of me perhaps wants to duck or run for cover or something like that. And yet the thrill would say, go for it. Enjoy it. So often, that's something we have the opportunity to do. Maybe you heard this story in the recent tornado events that have been not so far from here. We're in Austin, Texas, if you're just tuning in. So just north of here. Where's north? Is it like this way? Huh? I'm getting varying degrees. Okay. So it's somewhere like this. So somewhere north of here is Oklahoma. I have that right? Yeah. Okay. And the other parts, I know that the tornadoes have gotten around. And I'm not trying to, mock something here. I know that people are experiencing deep loss, family members, friends, tremendous destruction in the communities of property, and so on. But in that, there's also some wonderful stories about who we are spiritually that come out. So one of them that I heard about, and I heard the woman telling about it, and so she was a survivor, but her husband was literally taken, so that they, I think, were in a bathtub together or something like that, trying to get shelter as the tornado was hitting their house. And the man was covering his wife, and they were holding on to one another, and then the force of the wind, which goes up. I think most of us know that the wind is not just swirling around, it's also going up. And the very full force of it literally took the husband out of her arms. So she watched him go up into the clouds, and that was the last she saw of him. The last words he spoke to her was, "I love you." Her countenance, my point of view, was she is certain, and she spoke words to the effect, "I know God took him." And there was certainty in her words. Not, "I wish God took him. I hope God took him." God took him. And she was in thanks for this. So that part of it had praise to God. Was she still in something like shock, something like loss, something like misunderstanding? I'm sure. But, it was a very powerful message to me about a beautiful experience, that if we really were looking and then just imagining, well, what would that be like to have the one you love more than anybody in the world, and you just watch them go up in the clouds? I think it'd be kind of amazing. I mean, just the image of it is amazing to think about. Sometimes my experience of the movement of spiritual inner awareness is like a tornado. So that it can be sudden, that the way the experiences come forward isn't necessarily what I expect or what I want. But even if it is what I want, it can be something very powerful, certainly beyond my control. So that there are things that when we have a willingness to live in the truth of our soul inside, it's quite powerful. And also that we have a diagram of our logo. Let me see if I can do a version of it here. Oh, look, and we even have purple ink. I love purple ink when I'm doing the movement. Well, one way it starts is something like this. And then there's another way it kind of, well, that's my version. I know there's another version that looks different from that. So you go, that diagram you drew of the logo of the movement didn't look like that, but that's okay. So that's another version of a spiral. So it starts in a place, and as the spiral moves, it goes up and it expands. That makes sense? So if you look at a funnel, that's a spiral of sorts. And then there's a cyclonic movement, and it depends on which part of the hemispheres you're in. So north goes in one direction and south goes in another direction. Did you know that? Okay. Every once in a while, really? Are you making that up? It's like, no, the water, when it drains, I think in this is where, like which direction is in the northern hemisphere. It's like, I think it's this, that would be like clockwise, is that? So that if you're in the southern hemisphere, it actually goes counterclockwise. But if you looked at it like, well, in one direction it's like upside and the other one is downside, so maybe it's going in the same direction around the logos of the planet. My mind's like already blown by even trying to think about that conceptually, but that's the idea, is that we're in an energy of spirit that's always expanding, always going up. So we do relate to it in terms like higher consciousness. So if you're interested in your higher consciousness, then you're interested in what we're doing. Do we have membership? We actually consider that we don't. Even though I suppose legally we have 3 members, and that would be the offices of the church, and we have one of them in the room tonight, and that's Vincent Dupont, who's one of our presidencies. That we have 3 We don't ever let them be in the same plane or anything like that. Just in case. We tie our camels up. That means we do practical spirituality. So what we're doing has something that takes your courage, it takes your strength, your willingness to allow yourself to come into a full encounter with what's true about you, and to consider what's true about you transcends your physical world life. So whatever you know about your physical world life, your spiritual life is beyond that. And we're not really here to tell you what that is as much as we're here to share experiences about what that is, so that's my responsibility, but it's also your responsibility that when you express yourself, that we all have a responsibility to tell the truth. And it's one of the ways that we have problems, when we create difficulties for ourselves, is if we speak something counter to what we know, even if we don't do it so supposedly on purpose. Like, well, I didn't mean that, it just came out. You ever have one of those? I'll remind you of one of mine because it's still here all these many years later. Did you do that, John? No. Did I do it? Yes, I did. Well, why would I say no? Well, I didn't want to get in trouble. I was protecting myself. Isn't that understandable? Doesn't that make sense? To some degree. See, it takes great courage to do this. And how do we do that in such a way as we're abiding in our truth, we're maintaining our connection, that if we understood that we don't bear false witness, then if we do bear false witness, there's separation, there's disturbance in our force, there's a disconnect. And so the angels stand back, or the higher nature stands in abeyance, like not available, because we're not honoring our higher nature by witnessing to it. So I have the next words, God is in control. Did you see how that worked? Do you think I really control this being here? No, but I'm enjoying this being here. I'm appreciating this being here. And I'm enjoying that the opportunity for them to freely express themselves. Yeah, that was one of those beings that just did a little bump. Kind of like, hello. And then some of us might say, well, I'd like to run around a little bit. I'm a little bit fidgety. Could I just get up out of my chair? Sure. You know, that we don't have to be pint-sized in order to do this. That somehow we have often lost connection with our child nature. And it's important to come back into touch and attunement with our child nature, because one of us told all of us that if we want to enter the kingdom from which we have come, we need to be as a child. That is the key to entry. That is the passing that will move us into from where we have come. So that is another way of saying our movement is a kind of a coming and a going. Sometimes we refer to it as going home. Actually, there's a book, Polly Sanderson, who worked with John Roger more or less from the beginning, because she was one of the teachers at the school where he taught English in high school back in the early 60s. So that gives you some idea about how long this current chapter has been in process with John Roger, our founder. That she wrote a book called Coming Home. And it's a lot about John Roger's personal life and how he awakened into his spiritual knowledge and some of his childhood experiences, his family experiences growing up. So if you're interested in that, it's Coming Home. Do I have that name right? Oh, and you even have, When Are You Coming Home? Thank you. Okay. So if you just said now, you remember that? John, it's dinner time, John. Anybody grew up in a neighborhood like that? What happened to those neighborhoods? You know, somewhere like they said, we will now insert play dates and escorts as you go out to play. Oh, yeah, I was one of those. Anybody get in the back of a pickup and no one was concerned about that? You remember those days? Like you're just rolling around in the back of a pickup and nobody... There didn't seem to be any worry about that back then for some reason. Among other things, by the way. Open up, expand, grow. So in a way, what I see represented here are various levels of who we are in our experience and that we discover eventually. Let's say we know right now that we're levels of consciousness, we're multi-dimensioned in our consciousness. So one part of we would call physical nature, another part we would call of the imagination, of the emotions, of the mind, of the unconscious. And all of these integrate and also expand in how we come to understand them. I love this, thank you. So we have let go and let God. Anybody ever heard of that? Okay. So I would consider ourselves in a movement that we let go. Oh, I see. Is that open like a lid? Okay, well that's very good. Because anybody ever had an experience growing up that was a surprise and it hurt at the same time? Okay. So then in some way, there are those of us who have the experience to know better and to close the lid in some way so that we would determine there are certain things that we've been through that we pass on to one another, pass on to our children so that the sins, the errors, the transgressions don't come across to our next generation. And we're a movement that understands that we come around every now and then and we pick up ourselves as the next generation. So in other words, some people would call that reincarnation. That's okay. We refer to it as a re-embodiment, that we consider we've been here before, that's more the story that we wake up to. And we're working on getting it right. Anybody here working on getting it right? Okay. So we are a graduate school. Playing at the highest level. Because we want to go home so that the education part, the information part, is finished. And now it's the living part, the demonstrating part. We can do that. We have the ability. I remember when John Roger did a talk at a graduation of what was then Kohinoor University. Did anybody take classes at Kohinoor? Yeah, there's a few folks here. Which is now the University of Santa Monica, and it's still going very strong in areas of spiritual psychology. In the talk, John Roger referred to that it's not a degree about the ability to recite certain information, to be somebody who can talk about this study or that study or these results or those results and these conclusions scientifically, etc. Not that that isn't useful, but it really is about the ability to do. That this is a university that when you have this degree, you have the ability to do what it says you can do. So to move the spirit into the mind so that it's freely functioning in the mind and in all areas of our expression. So we are that movement. That was a little minor jiggling, if you were wondering, is he still jiggling? Yeah, he just came by and gave it a little bump, but not the same as the last one. Just seeing if you're awake. There we go. We're a spiritual family, so we're brothers and sisters. Children of God, so we have a shared heritage, so that we share the same father and the same mother. When we do our invocations, you'll often hear us say, Mother, Father, God. That out of God has come a duality. Long ago that was discovered. A polarity of a sort, an alpha and an omega. And so in how that functions in our world, that we're learning how to apply this learning, we have a seminary. It's a beautiful seminary, very well endowed, and how I mean that is in the Word, in the knowledge. But yes, it's also endowed to make these offerings available to those who are looking for them. Mark gave a beautiful, well, I'll just call it an interpretation of his own experience of what we're doing here, that we're all learning how to be in our divine nature. And our school specializes in those lessons that we need to learn in this world, the material lessons, so that we can fully experience our spiritual nature, our divine nature. That's what our seminary is endeavoring to make available. So we have degrees in spiritual science, if you're so inclined. We have some ground rules. I first heard these from John Roger, and they've been repeated over and over, and we will repeat them again now. That as you go about this world, considering that you came here and you took the body, you took the embodiment originally with a plan. So a plan was with you, a mission. You came in with a way to go about your life, a purpose. And part of that as an instruction was, don't hurt yourself and don't hurt others. So imagine if you could stand up right now and say, I've never done that. I've never been hurt, and I've never hurt anyone else. Now we're probably in that place where they say, to be human is to err. And to err is to be human. It's like, yeah, how do we not do that? Well, we strive towards it. That we take it on as a purpose, a dedication, a devotion. And when we, as I've heard Jared say it, mess up regularly when we do it, we make correction. Some of that correction is what John the Baptist talked about. We repent. We acknowledge our errors. So we have this courage to be honest, to be open, to be willing to talk about our experience, to meet up with it. We have another ground rule, take care of yourself. I'm just pausing so then you let that in whatever way you can, so that you would let greater care come to you as your own way of honoring yourself, that you could do that to a greater degree so you can help take care of others. And that can increase. And these are signs that we're in our spiritual nature. It's also been said that one of the signs we're functioning in our spiritual nature is we always leave wherever we go better than we found it. Anybody heard that before? Yeah, it's not something just John Roger has said, or it's something that we come to understand, that our life becomes a walking prayer. What does that mean? We're in our wisdom. We're in our willingness to serve, to help one another, to be helped in any way that applies. And we use everything for our upliftment. Notice how I said that. I declared it. So you can declare it for yourself. I use everything for my upliftment, my learning, and my growth. And just take that in. And then we release something. Those of you who've been having MSIA services, anybody? Okay, about half the group. What is MSIA services? It's our ministers, some of them in the room here, offer services such as an aura balance, a polarity balance. We call it interphasing. I'm not even going to try to explain or define. But the information's available. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's available. What are we doing? We're clearing. So we bring in spiritual blessing, we bring in the consciousness of the Christ, the Holy Spirit. And so whoever is there administering the service is charged with that responsibility. It is an invocation so that the Spirit does the work. So it's not based on the personal ability of whoever is the minister. It's based on God's ability and God's grace and God's mercy, so that we can let go of that which binds us, that which we have somehow allowed to come forward as a disease, as a disturbance, especially anything in the area of judgment. Because that's what does more harm than anything else. So if you could clear from your consciousness, go ahead, any judgments, any negative form where you resist, where you condemn, where you come into againstness, such as hatred, your depression, your anger, your frustration, your disillusionment. These are all forms that we can release and let go, and so we do a ministry to help with that. And it's a self-ministry, so it's a taking care of ourselves so that we're working on this. Anybody do an aura bounce more than 30 years ago? There's one over there. I knew there was. Yeah, see my hand's up. Well, how come it didn't work? It's like, oh, well, yeah. It's like a bathing. It's something that needs repeating. Why is that? Well, this is a world in which we get it on us. And it isn't always something that brings out our best nature or our beauty, so we need to clear and clean these things that disturb, that cause disease, that cause a misunderstanding between one another and amongst one another. So wouldn't it be nice if every head of state, every government just got their aura bounced? So there was no judgment. And does it release fear? Sure. I just look at fear as a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that God has taken care of us, that we have nothing to fear, that we're not our bodies. So if you have any fear about what's going on physically, fear of death, if you then have that towards others, that you fear losing someone or something, if you have self-doubt, if you harbor any form of disturbance, anything where you feel violation, all of these things need to come up and out. Let's call it the white tornado effect. So in comes the light, out goes these energies that they don't help you, they don't serve you, you don't need them, they're no longer necessary. So let them go. And what remains is an energy you can't cast out. The love of who you are, the love of God. That's your true nature, that's your life. And so in a very gradual, open door policy way, we partake. We claim this. And we have had many people who called us into question. Like, who are you to claim the highest God? Who are you to proclaim your association with the Christ? There are people that consider what we do a blasphemy. And that John Roger has talked about people telling him, you're the Antichrist. And you're like, what does that mean? It's probably in the eye of the beholder. Let's just consider it. When we really understand what that is, it's nothing. That there is nothing that can destroy what is the Christ. So then what is it? It's nothing, because it really can't do that. So should we even fear it? No, it's not necessary. Should we regard it as an understanding, as an acknowledgement, like, okay, there is a negative power, all right. But do we worship that? No. What do we worship? The abiding love that's here. The next words are, behold, know that I am God. So that's the authority of which I speak. So consider that I claim it. It's something we claim here as at the core of what we're doing. And again, you're welcome to call that in question, and we invite you to call it in question so that you do test the Spirit, that you test what's here, so you come into your own direct experience. You need to come into this as your direct experience. And you'll often hear, so you hear again now, don't believe me, don't believe what I'm telling you. Find your experience, find your source inside. The next words are, come, follow me. The first part of that, as I heard it, come. Like, get in here. Let's say the place where that was first spoken in the scripture, attributed to Jesus, calling the first disciple. Andrew gets that credit, typically. It was at the place of baptism, the Jordan River. It was after the baptism, if you're following the story as I have it. So come, it's like, I'm on the move. And part of that would be come into this. Come into this as the baptism of the Spirit. And there's a greater baptism that was referred to as the fire. So there's a baptism of the water, a baptism of the fire. On the day of Pentecost, when the disciples were gathered in the upper room, then fire came upon their heads. For what purpose? Let's consider so they would be done with the differences, with the agitation, with the opposition, with the misunderstanding, with the confusion. They would come into the oneness, that the whole Spirit that Jesus talked about, that I leave you with my Spirit. So I'm going to a place where you cannot go to prepare a place for you, to prepare a place for you to come follow. So the next part is follow me. Come, follow me. We're in that movement. So then you go, well, you haven't said too much about what's in here. It's like, well, I've made some reference. That was the Bible. Yeah, I was touching the good book. And how I have that is, let's get into the living Scripture. And it's not that we can't read about, hear from those who have the experience and study it and bring it into the value of what it is. But if we don't come into the consciousness of a living spirit that's alive now, here, in this place, in this time, then we've displaced ourselves. We're chasing something that's already with us. So the calling is to come here now. Be here now. Sounds like our friend Ram Dass. And why would I say such a thing? Because anyone who proclaims the living truth that is applying to all of us as something universal, something eternal, that's our friend. So it's not so important who says it or when they said it. It's more important that it's said, and it's said for what it is now. And that becomes a calling of the Spirit, to be a witness, to be a friend of the Spirit, that we would stand up and speak those words and do those actions that we were called into. You know, my point of view is we've been called into it a long time ago, but that doesn't matter. So it's not important. Well, do I need to find out where and when and how, and to sort out my laundry, and do I need to put it up all in the line, and do everybody have to come look at my laundry and say, oh, I didn't know you did that, and oh. I don't see that's important, because if it's all forgiven, it's forgiven. And there's a calling that comes into the forgiveness that says, now forget it. So if I had a wand here, let's say this hand is a wand, and I could go like this. It's like, forget the transgressions. Forget them. Well, then, are we doomed to repeat them? No, your truth protects you. So we all have an abiding truth that if we just trust what that is, if we abide in that, it takes care of us. So that we remember ourselves with our Godhood. That's what we're to remember, that we're beloved of God, that we're holy, that we're cherished. What does that mean? Regardless of what we've done against God, against our fellow brother or sister, against God's creation, that is forgiven, that the hand of forgiveness is upon us. Is there a greater blessing? I hope so. What would that be? That we rise up, that we step forward into this movement as those who love one another. So regardless of whatever words are on here that I haven't shared with you, where does this story go? It goes to a place like they're going to know you, that you're in this, that you're following, that you're of what I have done and I have showed you, because you love one another. So that's the mark. If you want the mark of what is this movement of spiritual inner awareness, it's do we love one another? Because that's our calling. That's our demonstration. And people have criticized this for not loving one another, and they have been correct. That there was room to do more loving of one another. You might say, I've never run across a group that needs to do more loving. Well, I'm sure they exist, but that's not the point. That we could do more of it. So that's the point, that if you want to know what we're endeavoring to do here, we're endeavoring to love and to be in this loving consciousness. Is there work? Oh yeah. Are there workers in the field? There sure are. And where's the field? Inside. So the primary work that we do is inside. It's within. We call it worship, but it's also something we refer to as spiritual exercise. What is it? We call out to God. And so we're given holy names. Are they recognizable? What makes a name of God recognizable? Especially if God goes by 108 names. Can you recite the 108 names? It's like, where is that list? Yeah, exactly. But you know, the point, and I've heard this from JR all along, is if God answers to the name you call. That's what's important. And why would God answer? Because you call out with all your body, mind, and spirit. You call out with the fullness of who you are. I think in the last week up in Oklahoma, and elsewhere I'm sure, but in Oklahoma there were people calling out to God with all they got. And there's people who would tell the story that the prayer was answered. Then you say, well, what about the people who were lost? Well, let's have them witness. Because if they were calling to God, maybe they'd bear witness if they could come here and testify. So just because their mortal life was taken doesn't mean that their prayer was not answered. That remains to be determined. So maybe one of our names is to be determined. It's an inner movement. I think I've been on that one. The worship is within. It looks like I tuned into that. The next words, your battle is over. Now, wouldn't that be nice to come to a place and the truth is spoken to? Your battle is over. You have no more battle. There's no more fight. There's no more against us in your life. There's no more harm. Really? Can you promise that? Not mortally. I don't control this world. So in this world, it appears there is harm. It appears there's a war going on. In the spirit, there's no war. So where is it taking place? Armageddon, where is that? Well, there's this place in Israel they call Megiddo. It's in the Megiddo Valley. Okay, there you go. I think it's got another name. Jezreel or something like that. In any case, you know, what does it mean? It's like, well, here are the place where the final stand is between the forces of good and evil. And they come to this place. And just to understand that we're in that we're in this so-called decision. Like, what is your life? And even if you've said this before, my life is good, I give it up to God. You say it again. Why? For whatever part of me still needs to hear it. So then we repeat ourselves and we start again each day. There's a place in the scripture where attributed to St. Paul, it's talked about as to die daily. Well, if there's a dying daily and you're still here, then there's a being born daily. Does that make sense? You know, that every day we pick it up. I saw it in the moment of peace, so hopefully if you're watching this, then they show you the moment of peace so you know what I'm referring to. But that we're born anew. And it was the part where J.R. was talking about the manger and the place of being birthed. So that we go into soul transcendence every day. Every person goes into soul transcendence. What is that? We go unconscious. What is that? Well, it's called sleep, but what is that? It's still being discovered. It's a mystery. But there's something about the state that we call sleep that we need to go to a source that rejuvenates, and we find it. Because how many here could survive without that? How long would you go? You know, I don't think I would go very long, because I start hallucinating pretty quickly. What does that mean? It's just if I'm not getting rest, if I'm not going to my source, I start becoming very dysfunctional. Well, let's put it this way, more dysfunctional than I already am. So we need it. In the movement of spiritual inner awareness, we specialize in going straight to that source. That's our prime directive. It's go to God immediately, learn how to bypass the hitches, the glitches, whatever would be the restrictive nature in the body, in the mind, to learn how to bypass that. And we have a consciousness that we refer to as the traveler, the mystical traveler, who is amongst us, who specializes in going to the soul, bringing your awareness to the soul, even if your mind doesn't make it. What does that mean? You don't necessarily remember it, but you still go anyway. You garner the experience. How do you do that? By asking for it. So if you're new, ask for it. Ask for the mystical traveler to work with you. And if you're saying, well, I don't know enough, and I'm not sure, and I don't want to be defrauded, and I think maybe you're just here because of the power or the money, and okay. I'm not here to prove that, but test it. But how about, do you have the faith and the trust in yourself to go for it? To ask for the consciousness to work for you, that if it is false, if it is attempting to mislead you, that you have wisdom and knowledge and your own ability and your strength, in your loyalty to your own soul, that you wouldn't allow it. Well, I seem to have some memory back here when I did allow it, when I was misled. And, I've been conned, I've been betrayed, and people cheated me. Okay. Well, let's consider that in you is a consciousness that doesn't lie, that doesn't cheat. And we'll call it for now your inner master. That consciousness in you that comes from God to work directly with you, to assist you as your friend, as your teacher, as your guide. So would you be willing to ask that consciousness to come forth? However you do that, so you do it according to your consciousness. If you go through the information from John Roger, and now I'm doing my own version, and there are others here who share it, so it isn't like, oh, there's only two people who can speak for the movement of spiritual inner awareness. Everybody has their experience. And you can share it. You're encouraged to share from your experience, from what you know. Has anybody ever here gotten into trouble of some kind because you shared what you didn't know? Well, I sure have. Would I embellish just a little bit to make it more interesting? A white lie, but a lie nonetheless. So we teach you to be more aware of where the truth is and to be willing to abide in that, not partially, but completely, as your experience, as your choice. And we find it works always in loving. So if you can take loving and truth and integrate them, that's the movement of spiritual inner awareness. That's who we are. So we are lovers of the truth. And truth lovers. And lovers, and truth. There we go. We covered all the 4 quadrants. The place is prepared. Lo, I'm always with you. So that's as far as I got before I came up here. So considering that that's the truth that we all share, and every soul in the world shares this. The place is prepared. Where? Inside. The calling is inside. The calling is to come to the place of worship in your own way and make your way there. There is a great opportunity to do that in a very simple way. You can do it as simple as this: Oh God. That's a prayer. It goes up. What does God say? What do you want, my beloved? Perhaps. Perhaps it's the opportunity to see more clearly, be aware more of what you seek, what would set you free, so that this movement moves towards liberation, that soul transcendence takes place as liberation, that's our heritage, that all of us are to be unbound from this earthly world and the worlds that are of that nature. So if we consider there are many mansions, there's heavens, there are many dimensions that we're being liberated from all those that are of a learning nature until that moment when we're free. So we're in that movement. It's something that if you have the courage and the willingness, and you do, so then it's a matter of, do you exercise it? And just consider that it's not about John Morton or John Roger or Jesus the Christ. It's like, some people go, how can you say such a thing? Are you willing to be struck down? It's like, I'm just saying it's not about a personage. It's about something that is found in God. That when we are in that consciousness of our divine nature, there's no battle, there's no disease, there's no dying. Then what is there? There's a fellowship, there's a celebration, there's a glory. Happy days are here again. Beirish Bishan. Let me see if I can. I'm going to call you up here in a moment, Mark. But I don't think I've ever done this before, so this will be kind of fun because I'm going to do it. So I'm going to describe what Mark's going to come up here and do, at least in part. Is he's going to give you some information about, if you're more interested in following through, including those of you who've been involved for years and years, that there are opportunities. From here, we're going to be, we're going to be back here tomorrow night for those of you who are Discourse subscribers, right? All right. Anybody here, you don't know what I'm talking about, or you're definitely not a Discourse subscriber. Anybody that fit? There you go. See, we had some hands like, what's going to happen to me if I admit this? You're going to be surrounded by greater love and tickling, of joy. But in any case, if you're here tonight and you want to be with us tomorrow night and you're willing to enter in to the study, and it's really about those who are actively studying, so we move beyond introductory level, which is where we've been tonight. Though I know the Spirit does its thing at full power as much as you can handle. So the idea is like, I don't want to come to one of those introductory open seminars because, nothing really important is going to happen. My experience is, come at whatever gathering, But if you want to be here tomorrow night, it's available to you if you want to enter into the study. And it really is for those who want to be on your way. So we're going to have an opportunity for me to ask questions and you to provide answers. And see how well you're going to do on the final exam. So in some way, this doesn't sound nice, but is a proctor, is that somebody that helps you study? Is that right? Boy, that's a rude name for some reason, but anyway. That we're just going to help you realize what's next for you. So we give an opportunity for questions and answers. Basically, that's the evening is dedicated to that. And there are people here that have been involved for at least 30 years. Let's see, 40 years, that would be 73. Anybody involved? 70? See, there's Carl. So Carl's been here for 40 years. That's just about as long as John Roger, who... Oh, okay, Nina, 72, okay. So this has been going on a while. Yeah. And we're going to celebrate John Roger's 50th year of holding the consciousness, which is a way of saying that he's now 78 for his body, and he had the transformation into the mystical traveler consciousness in 1963. So in about a month, we're going to be doing a celebration, and it's going to be a hoedown. It's going to be, I'm being held like in a booth where I can't hear or see anything, but do you remember the $54,000 question, was that? $64,000 question, and they would put them in a booth? Okay. Anyway, even with what I have come to know, because certain things leak out, or I know a few things, it's going to be, let's consider our greatest conference ever. So I'm encouraging people to show up, and there's a lot of you already showing up from around the world, but maybe just, you wouldn't want to miss this one, you know, like, dang, I wish I would have gone. You know, I'm encouraged to be there. So we will be doing a workshop called Communicating Love. I'm going to be facilitating that on the Wednesday night. And then we have our Institute for Individual and World Peace will do an event. We also have a graduation of our seminary, which people often attend who are friends, and so you can just consider yourself a friend. We have a workshop focused on the mystical traveler consciousness for 2 days. That'll be on Friday and Saturday. Dates, anybody? July 1st? First weekend of July? Okay, so the Friday and Saturday. On the Friday evening, we're going to have the official world debut or something like that, premiere of the Mystical Traveler film, which is the life and times of John Roger. And I've seen enough already to know it's spectacular. It's just amazing. There were Super 8 films that were more like home movies from the 70s that have been reprocessed so that it's digitally amazing, what we see and hear. I know that's going to be a surprise, so I'm looking forward to that. I just know if you'd want to be there, it's going to be a great occasion. They already need to have more than one screening at this point. The next night we're going to have whatever is the official celebration on Saturday night, so it's going to be a program that everything is being prepared for. So that's the one that they keep putting me in the hermetically sealed booth, so that they don't let me know what's actually going to take place. But anyway, I think it's going to be spectacular. And then we have initiates and a ministers meeting on the Sunday of that weekend for those of you who are initiated and active also as ministers. So there you go. There's other things that are going on that I'm not mentioning, but I wanted to make sure you're invited to that, and at some level, if you feel the pull, then lean into it. See if you can arrange for the time or whatever that takes. There are people that are assisting. In other words, there are people that have offered already to help people with places to stay and things like that. It's not a formal thing or a guarantee. It's just we're a family, so we help one another. Let's see, what else was Mark going to do? He was going to... That's a beautiful song. Is that yours that you sang tonight?
No, it was written by John.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You spoke that. Thank you. All right. Okay, thank you. So if you're interested in more of the materials, you were going to talk about some of the materials at the back table. So there are many books and also references including, well, that's a sample copy, right? Yeah, okay. But you might want to look around, and there's a couple of my books back there. I'm going to do an exit stage right. Is that stage right? I think it is. Yeah. Those of you who have been in the theater world, then it's according to the actor's perspective, so the stage right. But I'm going to come back. So I do this clearing action. It's kind of like what Clark Kent used to do, and he goes into a phone booth and then he comes back out. And so if some of you would like to meet me, or I'll be here a little later after I get a chance to clear. So please give a very warm, heartfelt, beautiful welcome to our MC, Mark. Come on back up.
His Clark Kent process. And so to give you some logistics on products, and at the back table, John mentioned discourses. They really are a tremendous way to further yourself into the study of soul transcendence and what we've been talking about tonight. And in discourses, there's a study guide for each month of the year. That's how it's designed. And the first year is at the back table, and they're typically $100, but the first year is $50. So you could get that at the back table tonight. And there are, as John mentioned, a lot of books and study materials and tapes and meditations, and they are all no tax tonight and no shipping fees if you want to have them shipped tonight, only tonight. So again, John made mention of tomorrow night's Q&A. And again, it is for Discourse subscribers. And we also want to announce, too, that if you want to partake of home seminars, we have at least one home seminar that's active right now here in the Austin area. And Katie, could you run the mic over to Jay if he's in the room, or George? Jay said he was going to talk. Thanks, Maya. And we'll turn it over to Jay, and he's going to talk about that.
Hi, I'm Jay. George and I do a home seminar on the first and third Wednesday, and we live in central Austin, east of I-35. First and third Wednesday, right? Thursday. First and third Thursday. I've had an aura balance and a polarity balance somewhere in here. So the first and third Thursday of the month, and we watch a JR DVD or John Morton DVD, and then we have sharing afterwards, and it's always very lovely, and the dogs love it when we chant on IHU. So we do have dogs, just so people know that.
Thanks, Jay. And also for those of you who are still watching online, yes, honey. This is my daughter, Lily, who is my assistant. And for those of you who are online, the materials that we're talking about are also available to you at MSIA.org. And if you follow the links, there is a shopping section on the website, too, as well. So one more thing I want to announce is that every summer in Los Angeles, there is a big event where the entire MSIA community from around the globe gathers for what we call conference. And this year it starts on July the 3rd, And again, it's in Los Angeles, and much more information about that is available online at msia.org. Well, once again, thank you all for coming tonight. And John Morton, thank you so much. Staff, MSIA staff, we thank you. For those of you who tuned in on the internet, thank you for joining us tonight. That concludes our event for tonight. Thanks again for coming. And if you come tomorrow night, we'll see you then. God bless.